Oh, I didn't finish my thought there. Ha! How sweet. My writing sucks.
Keep rolling. Keep rolling.
Hello and welcome to Reggie'sTake.com podcast number 36. A horrifying dancing clown is taking the box office by storm as one of the best horror films. James and I will give you our 2 cents on what we thought of the movie. A new trilogy is being planned for a franchise that's running on fumes, but the director who began the franchise is returning to oversee this new trilogy and bringing back its female lead with him. And what does one movie studio chairman say how their newest comic book movie will stand out from the others? We'll tell you. Joining me today is my co-host, as always, James. Thank you for joining us. It's been a little bit again. We're kind of not as frequent as we were last year on our podcast.
Well, it's just been a much more hectic year, I think, for both of us.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to speak for you, but I think that's actually true. So
yeah, and there has been as many movies that caught my eye that I just have to rush out and go see.
They all came out at the same time, so we covered them all with Spider-Man. It was
then you had your surgery, and then that kind of threw things off a little bit too. So, but that's all right. I'll admit this right off top because we are going to talk about the movie It here, and I am not what would you call a horror movie genre fan.
Oh, I definitely am.
I mean, it's just not my cup of tea. I mean, I've seen some. I mean, I've seen The Fly 2, which it's not probably any good as close to The Fly, but anyway, I've seen very few horror.
Wait, The Fly 2?
Yeah, don't worry about it.
The sequel to the Cronenberg one with Jeff Goldblum?
Yes. Yes.
I didn't know there was a sequel. Is it still Cronenberg? Probably not. Let's just assume it's not.
Don't worry about it. Anyway, the only reason why I saw it because I went with a friend in high school when it was out, and so. But anyway, back to my point though, I'm just not a horror movie fan. And the reason why I really went to see the movie It is because at one point I did read the book years ago.
Okay.
From Stephen King. Now, I have not read it as recently as I know you have or even my wife.
Yeah.
But I was curious as to what they did with the movie because I always felt the miniseries they did back in 1990 that ran on, I believe it was on ABC at the time, was okay, but it never really came close to doing the book justice. And being on TV, you really can't to a certain extent. And I get
There's
that.
A lot of censorship. That
you have
this
to go
book
through.
is pretty X-rated.
Right.
I mean, the movie's R-rated, but the book is like a lot
very graphic in detail. Yeah. But that's one thing that attracted me to want to go see the movie It is I was curious since it was rated R and they didn't say it was PG-13. Now, if they had said PG-13 on the movie It, I'd have been like, pass.
Yeah, I wouldn't have even seen it, honestly.
Because I would have like, what's the point?
A PG-13 horror movie is garbage to begin with. There might be a couple, but they tend to be horror comedies. Shaun of the Dead is great. Shaun of the Dead is a movie that transcends everything, so that doesn't count. But for the most part, a serious horror movie that goes for PG-13 is just total garbage.
Right.
Like it's made to scare little kids and boring adults, and that's it.
Yeah.
They're never good.
No. I went and saw It as of the recording of this podcast was just yesterday. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I found it a mixture of several movies in a certain sense, with it being just the kids for the most part as the main characters. And I felt there wasn't as much horror in the movie as I thought there might be. But to me, I felt it was enough. It did the movie justice.
In a lot of ways, I know obviously there's the 80s vibe. The movie takes place in the 80s, whereas in the book,
it was 55.
It was 50s.
Yeah.
So obviously right away, you've got the whole Goonies and everything else that comes to mind from the 80s. Those
Stand By Me.
Yeah, which another Stephen King. But, you know, the whole kids in danger sort of thing that was really big in the 80s. So there's the obvious. But then there's also really harkens back to kind of the, at least for horror movies, the 70s where, you know, like Exorcist and Alien and I know Shining was 1980, but, you know, whatever. AD, like, I mean, you know, those movies, there isn't horror, there isn't something spooky going on every scene, and the characters aren't talking about something spooky in every scene, you know? Mm-hmm. There's actually a story going on, and the scenes that are scary are kind of few and far between compared to modern horror movies, but when they are there, they're just that much more exhilarating. They're that much more terrifying. Yeah, I thought it was really good. There's some things that I didn't like, obviously. You know, especially since I just read the book and, you know, I saw the old miniseries when I was a kid. There were some changes, and usually I don't mind when they make changes to a movie. You have to do it. But there were a few that I'm a little iffy about. Like, I don't necessarily dislike them, but like, I didn't like that they switched Ben in the book. Ben was the engineer.
Okay.
And Ben was like the smart one. In the movie, he's just kind of the fat one. Like, yeah, they kind of switched a lot of them around. And, you know, in the movie, Ben is the one doing all the research on the town, whereas in the book, that was Mike. Also in the book, I thought this was kind of weird in the movie. Well, they gave Mike a whole new backstory. In the movie, weren't his parents burned in that apartment or something? Is that what happened? I kind of didn't catch it.
I'm not as fresh on the book as I want.
No, I mean the movie. Like, what was the whole thing about the burned apartment victims that were after him?
I'm not sure. I know the one kid that they go save from being beaten up where they have the rock fight, his parents, I guess, from what I took, got burned in wherever home they were living at the time.
And now he lives with his grandpa on the farm.
Right. He lives with his grandfather.
And see, in the book, that none of that happened. I thought it was kind of interesting how his grandpa is kind of like this stern, you know, means well kind of guy, but might be a little bit too tough, you know, like a very tough love kind of father figure. Not a bad guy by any means, not a bad parent.
Just trying to
just like
him
a
up.
little. Yeah. Whereas in the book, Mike and his dad still are best friends. And like they get along and love each other so much that it's almost a bit much. So I thought that was kind of weird that they changed that. And I'm not entirely sure why they did that. It almost seemed like they had to give everyone like a sad backstory.
But if you never read the book,
me. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a bad thing by any means.
But if you
I
never read the book, it was very easy to follow. Now, Now I'm not as I said, fresh in my head with the book because it's been years since I've read it. And I'm not a fast reader, so that book took me like a year to read.
That book is 1,200 pages, by the way. Yeah, it took me 2 months of excessive reading because, like, you know, the first 200 pages took a long time to get through. And then once I got to about 300, it kind of flew by after that, once I got to know all the characters. Yeah, and that book goes all over the place. It'll go from the 50s when they're kids
to adults,
but then it'll follow one kid, but then it goes to the 50s, but then it backflashes to earlier in the school year where present day of the 50s, even though the present day is the 80s, but the present day of the past, which is really hard to explain, is in the summer. So then they'll flash back to like winter when the first time they see the clown or whatever. So it's weird.
Yeah, I see. And I was wondering how they were going to pull that off with just making this first movie all about the kids, considering the way the book, as you just mentioned, kind of jumps all over the place, how they were going to make it.
The book is very non-linear, extremely non-linear.
And I thought they did an excellent job with it.
I thought they did too. There are a few sacrifices that are made in making it more linear. And the big one is we see them on the last day of school. And then the rest of it is summer, which is fine. But between that, see the book... You know, the miniseries doesn't age well, to say the least. I mean, but there are things in the miniseries that I think actually, there's a few things that I think the miniseries got a little bit better than this movie did, and maybe two things. And one thing was, and this was a big focus in the book, is, yeah, they are facing literal hell on earth with the clown, with Pennywise, who is basically a Craftian, multi-dimensional being. It is literal hell on earth with this monstrous clown, but also it's really an allegory for the hell of growing up.
Right.
Like they have a bully, and you know, by the way, the bully wasn't just a bully. He was a psychopath. He was also racist.
That was very evident in the movie.
It was. I wish they would have actually come out and said it. They kind of...
They gave you enough to know,
yeah,
this guy is not...
Not to get into it, because it doesn't need to go that far, but maybe with, like, real-world stuff that's going on in America, maybe it's best to just show it rather than to say it. Because in the book, there's Mike, the black kid, and then there's Stan, the Jewish kid, and they really hated the Jewish kid. They hated them both in the book. And then there's just the, you know, with the parents and everything, and the anxiety of school. There's this hell of growing up, but also they're doing it. They're growing up. And the movie caught that. It just didn't have a whole lot of time. You know, we're following 6 characters, and we're not really going in a non-linear fashion. We're going very linear. So they didn't really have time to really take a hold of that, but they did capture it. That's just one of the sacrifices that's made in the way that they made the movie. But overall, I think they made the right choice. Yeah, I wasn't too big on Ben. But there is something that I really liked, and your wife actually pointed this out to me, was in the movie, Ben actually, he's the one that tells Beverly how he feels about her, whereas in the book, he was always too cowardly to do it, to
admit it.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, yeah, that's a really good point, because I did like that in the movie, and that was really, really nice. So,
well, also what I liked about the movie was, instead of just kind of like you do on some, not even just horror movies, but on even other movies, sometimes they skip over the backstory of why things are going on. And this movie actually, although they didn't spend a lot of time, at least the 2 times that I'm aware of that they really did it, even I think maybe even 3 times, but they at least stopped enough to kind of give you enough idea of, this is not just happening now. This has happened before, with Ben in the library looking through the book. Mm-hmm. And then, when they're out after swimming in the reservoir area or whatever it was, flipping through his paperwork, looking through all that stuff then. And then again in his bedroom with all that stuff he had on his walls. I mean, they didn't necessarily talk to you, but at least they gave you enough, letting you read things. If you were able to kind of read things quickly on, it kind of helped fill in that, okay, this has all gone on before with kids disappearing or being killed. And instead of just quickly glossing over it and trying to figure out, if you had never read the book, well, why is this all going on? It kind of helped. And I like that they stopped and kind of did that. It kind of helped ease you back into the movie of like, when's the next one? But it made it feel more like a bad choice of reference here, but almost like, Scooby-Doo. They're trying to figure out what the hell is going on and trying to solve this problem. And I actually kind of like that.
Yeah.
I really thought they did a well job for only keeping it in the kids, no adults other than the parents here and there. But
well, and the parents were like the adults in that movie were all like
screwed up,
basically zombies.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe there's some sort of allegory going on there, but maybe it's just like in the book, Pennywise, he is able to cloud people's minds, and that maybe it's simply literal what's going on. Mm-hmm. That scene, though, where they're looking at the slides, that one was pretty messed up. I think that one was the one that got me, where like first there's pictures, and then you see the pictures,
and then it just starts
and then he just
faster
pops out of the picture.
Yeah,
I was like, okay, that's pretty scary.
And as I heard you discussing before we started this podcast, they really didn't put in pop-up horror things just to scare the hell out of you.
What
just
do they
because
call
they
it?
could.
Jump scares.
Yeah.
That actually goes back to what I was saying about how it kind of reminded me of like a 70s horror. Is nowadays, especially with all this PG-13 crap, that's all they do is jump scares, which is an extremely cheap way to do a movie. It's extremely cheap. Mm-hmm. It's like watching a sitcom with a laugh track, basically.
Right.
Except at least... really, I mean, there are a few shows with laugh tracks that I like. For the most part, I hate them.
MASH, the first 4 or 5 seasons had laugh tracks, but then they kind of slowly went away.
There's other shows that and they may not be great shows, but I like that 70s show or whatever. There are shows with laugh tracks that are able to utilize it well, but then there are some that are still able to tell a good story or at least have some funny jokes. But then there are some shows that most of them just totally rely on it as a crutch. Even the shows with laugh tracks that I like, there is a begrudging part to it. But I can't think of any horror movie that's nothing but jump scares that I like. I don't think that jump scares are scary. I think that they're just cheap. I really can't think of any.
Okay.
Well, I guess Evil Dead, but Evil Dead has a lot more going on than jump scares, so I mean, that's an example where like, yeah, they have them, but there's a lot more twisted stuff going on besides just
Most horror movies for me, or at least the ones I've ever come across, I can deal without the gore. And I know that's the part of, quote, horror movie, but I'm just not a gore person, even though I know it's not real blood, it's not real heads being cut off or guts being displaced or whatever else they're maybe doing in any particular movie. I just don't like seeing it. It just kind of like, okay.
If it's utilized well, the problem with it is that's another one that can be a cheap crutch. Because you think about it, Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Halloween, neither of them have blood. Halloween, I think they had a drop of blood in one scene, and maybe not. Texas Chainsaw Massacre doesn't even have a drop. Like, there's no blood in those movies. And what's funny is, less so with Halloween, but with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, after people see it for the first time, they always remember it as being this really bloody, messed up movie. But you have to tell them, actually, no. Almost everyone remembers it wrong. It's one of those really weird things. And even me, when I think about it, but it's like, no, there's no blood in that movie. You just, for whatever reason, that movie's just so psychologically twisted. The family, have you ever seen it?
No.
What?
No.
I'm going to make you watch that. When the family of inbred rednecks are all sitting around the table, like, that is one of the most messed up scenes. It's pretty wild.
I don't like watching movies that are disgusting just to be disgusting.
It's not, though. There's no
I'm not saying what you're talking about is gory. I just don't like movies that use the gore to be gore. So that's all I was getting at. I just don't like movies who use the gore to be the gore. If there's a purpose for the gore, I'm fine with it.
I was pretty shocked that they went and showed Georgie without his arm crawling around. I didn't think they were going to do that. I figured they'd show his body. That's another odd thing about the movie is that the kids all are missing, whereas in the book they find most of their bodies. They're just dismembered and everything, which doesn't bother me. It's just like, why'd they change that? I don't get that. Yeah, that's what I figured was that they were going to show his body, but now they show that kid with his arm bit off and bleeding to death, crawling around, and it's like, holy shit. Okay, and that's 5 minutes into the movie, and any parent that brought their kid to the movie, I hope is regretting it right now. It's a spooky clown, and we've all seen the one with Tim Curry, but it's rated R for a reason. In this day and age, an R-rated movie is rated R. It's not Terminator 2.
Right.
Like, it deserves its R rating at this point. Like, if it's R rated, don't bring your kids to the theater. Let them watch it at home with you on Blu-ray, but...
Because it seems like nowadays, they don't give out R ratings.
No, they often don't.
So when you do get a movie that is R, there's probably some serious crap going on
this
in that movie.
And then for the superhero movies, Logan and Deadpool were both very R-rated.
And they worked for those.
Yeah,
that was great.
It's just like, they deserve their R ratings now.
I don't have it written down in front of me, but I did read somewhere where Stephen King saw the final cut of the movie, and the movie even made him jump a time or two.
Really?
It's something that he didn't expect him to kind of actually go with or do in the final movie, but from what I understand, from what I read, he really approved of what they did.
One thing with Stephen King, and he'll admit this, and he has admitted this, is a lot of his work is derived from H.P. Lovecraft. And after I read it, I could definitely see it. I could also see it after reading The Shining. I could also get it by watching the old movie The Shining too. But with H.P. Lovecraft, there's always whatever is trying to kill you is so complicated that it's beyond human comprehension. And that's kind of how the clown is. It's beyond our understanding. It's
interesting.
Like this crazy ass clown. Yes, but that's the form that it chooses. Like, you even see a glimpse of it when it opens its mouth, its big maw, and you see these lights coming out. It's basically this extra dimensional. It's almost showing its true form, where it's this extra dimensional being. We're looking at it. Just doesn't make any mental sense to us.
Now I can say I have 3 movies made from Stephen King novels that I actually like.
What are they?
It, Green Mile, Stand By Me.
What about The Shining? You don't like that one?
I'm not a big
I
fan of
love that movie. That's like really one of my favorite movies. Yeah, Stand By Me is great. What about Shawshank Redemption?
Oh, okay. I forgot about that one too. So there's 4.
There's got to be more.
I'm sure there's more, but those 4 are the ones that...
Carrie's good.
I'm not big on that one. So
I didn't really like Christine.
Personal preference.
Like it's a car.
Would you believe they made this first It only on a budget of $35 million?
Yeah, and that's good. These movies...
I hope they kind of stick to that kind of theme for the second one, too.
I don't...
You don't need a high budget to make these things work.
No.
Same way with kind of the superhero movies. I mean, Deadpool was a $60 million budget, and it worked.
Yeah, you just have to make a good movie.
Right. Also have a good script, first off. So that always helps. Anything else on it before we move on?
There's a lot of stuff. There's the turtle, which if you read the book, it makes no goddamn sense, but it's basically another creature from another universe or dimension who is kind of an opposing force to the clown, who I guess the clown is a spider or whatever. I don't know. In the movie, there's a few references. You see Georgie's has made a Lego turtle. A turtle out of Legos, and then when they're swimming in the water, a turtle swims by them, and they're like, oh, it's a turtle. So there's some references to that. There's actually a lot of references to a lot of things in this movie that I really like.
I probably wouldn't have picked up on those because
it's been so long.
It's been so long for me.
Yeah, and it's still pretty fresh in my mind. Also, all the winks and nods where there wasn't too big on this, but obviously Bill, stutterer or not, he's the good-looking one, so of course he gets with Beverly. But there are some winks and nods nods headed over towards Ben. In the book, it was more those two. Oh, also, at the beginning, I could not believe how well they captured, because I actually read the first chapter of it twice, because it was so weird, but I could not believe how well they captured. That was almost straight out of my mind. The rest of the movie wasn't, but the mom was playing piano, and it was the same song. It was Fur Elise by Beethoven.
You're talking all the way up with Georgie with the boat, all the way down to the gutter.
Yeah.
Okay.
And see, when she's playing that in the book, she's really into Beethoven and really against rock and roll. Actually, I'm going to get into something I didn't care for. In the book, they're always talking about Chuck Berry.
Okay.
You know, they have to hide their Chuck Berry records because, you know, their mom's into classical. And, you know, it's the 50s and their parents think that rock and roll music is the devil music, which was a real thing. Make matters worse, Chuck Berry was black, and some of the parents didn't want their kids listening to black people music, which, again, real thing. On the movie, since there wasn't anything quite like that in the 80s, Ben listens to New Kids on the Block. That's, it's like, okay, a one-time joke is fine, but they like overdid that.
I thought the best one they did with that was when she closed his door and saw
Actually, that was pretty funny.
And then pulled it back, yeah.
She was great. Didn't they even call her Molly Ringwald? Because the whole time I was thinking she reminded me of her, and it's like, well...
They made a joke about that.
Yeah, okay, yeah. She was really good. Actually, all the kids were really good. I have a feeling she's probably a little bit older than what she was playing.
Probably so.
I think she was probably like maybe 16 or 18. She just seemed a little bit more mature, but she was really good. And usually they are older. I mean, it used to be, they're doing this less, but it used to be teenagers were always played by 30-year-olds. But
the actress name was Sophia Lillis. Beverly. We could probably look her up.
Oh, another thing I really liked was they got this spot on from the book, and maybe even better in the movie, though, was Richie and Stan's relationship. Richie was like this annoying kid that would always make jokes and just would never shut up. He and Stanley were like best friends, and the way whenever Richie would go too overboard, the way Stanley would snap at him to shut up with like one word to just shut him down. After he'd make a bad joke, he'd just shut him down with one word. It was so funny to me. They got that just perfect. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Remember the hobo, the leper that was coming after Eddie.
Okay.
I'm glad that they put that in. They cut it out a little bit. And see, in the book, at first, all the kids are being chased by like either the clown or... For Bill, it's the ghost of his brother, and both the clown and the ghost are kind of scary, but then the other stuff they're scared of, movie monster stuff, which is, so it's the mummy or the creature from the Black Lagoon or like Rodan, and I'm like, okay, this book's kind of stupid. But then all of a sudden it gets to Eddie's fear, which Eddie's fear is a homeless man with either leprosy, probably syphilis, yelling at Eddie, "I'll give you a blowjob for a dime. I'll suck your dick for a dime." And I'm like, oh, this book got scary right now. Okay, never mind. This book is really, really scary. He doesn't say that in the movie, but they still had him, so I was glad for that. But yeah, that was like the scariest thing when this homeless guy with diseases is trying to get a kid to give him a dime to suck his dick. Like, that's so awful. Yeah, and Pennywise, at first I was a little leery of the design, because that is one thing, you know, and maybe this was actually a little better in the old series, but, you know, Tim Curry's clown looks like a clown. And on the one hand, I actually do think that's a little bit scarier.
See, definitely Tim Curry's version of Pennywise to me looked more like Bozo the Clown than he did.
Right. And in a way that's scarier because it's very obviously metaphorical for a child molester or a child predator as someone who entices a child, something that's like
can quickly
very
earn their trust.
Yeah. Whereas this clown is so goddamn scary looking. No child. George deserved to get his arm bitten off for reaching. That thing's so scary. So at first I was a little hesitant about the design. I do think, though, that was probably the only choice they had was to make the clown like really dark and spooky because they've already done the John Wayne Gacy clown, so to speak, with Tim Curry. I was okay with that, but I gotta say, like, now that I've seen the movie, I thought he did a really good job. Even though he was all spooky, he had that little kid's voice, and so he still was kind of enticing. I thought he did a really good job. And then when he does the dancing marionette thing, that was just so weird. Like I said, this was a really, really good movie. It was a good horror movie. You know, I'm not sure if I'd give it an A. I might give it a B+, but maybe an A-. I don't know. It was really good. I think I'll give it a B+, so.
Definitely a solid B for me.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's a few things that usually I don't mind when they deviate from the book, but there were a few that I couldn't really see the reason why they deviated.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the appeal of this movie doing so well is whether you've read the book or not read the book.
It's still a good movie.
It's an excellent movie.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a B+. I'm not gonna knock it. Who am I? I haven't created anything good.
Well, they say the second one should come out sometime 2019. They said we will get more Pennywise than we got this one, and there will be flashbacks with the kids in this one.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Yeah.
So they're gonna, even though it'd probably be more focused to them as adults, they said that you will have some crucial
the only thing that worries
kids.
me about the statement, we're going to get more Pennywise, that sounds like,
but then again,
that sounds like this sequel's going to be more badass than the last one.
But then again, I mean, more Pennywise could mean 10 more minutes of screen time, and that's really it. I mean, and technically that would be more Pennywise. So if they put this kind of effort into the second one that they did in the first one, I don't think they have any worries.
Yeah.
I think the second one everyone should be anticipating the second one by the time it comes around. So, yeah, I love the movie. So, if you haven't seen it, go see it, but just don't take your kids, please.
Yeah,
please don't take
your
kids
if you do that. Don't take your kids to this. Don't take them to Deadpool 2. Use your brain. Like, they can watch them at home with you. Like, I'm all for kids watching R-rated movies, but
do it at home.
Yeah, the rest of us don't want to deal with it.
Moving on to some other movie news, James Cameron has announced that Linda Hamilton will be returning to the Terminator franchise and reprising her role as Sarah Connor. He made this announcement at a benefit he was speaking at, and he said, quote, "As meaningful as she was to gender and action stars everywhere back then, it's going to make a huge statement to have the seasoned warrior that she's become return. There are 50-year-old and 60-year-old guys out there killing bad guys, but there isn't an example of that for women." Cameron came up with this outline for the story for this first film they're going to do. The director from the first Deadpool movie, Tim Miller, is right now attached to direct it. Schwarzenegger will also be returning to join Linda Hamilton. This movie will pick up at some point after Judgment Day. He's ignoring everything they made after Terminator 2. He's just completely ignoring that, basically wiping those off.
So this is going to be like the Superman Returns of Terminator.
They said that Cameron and Miller are planning this to be a new trilogy, and each of the three movies will be able to serve as standalones, but in the end will create an overall arcing story.
First off, James Cameron needs to be careful with making anything a trilogy if he's still trying to make Avatar into a 10-movie thing or whatever. Because
I get that.
Because here's the deal. Like, I'm not going to knock Avatar. It's a really good kids movie, and it was a great visual accomplishment and a good movie. Mm-hmm. But if he wants to make a series out of that, he should have made a sequel already like 5 years ago. Like, people are already kind of, I feel like a lot of people have kind of moved on from that movie. Yeah. I mean, it was still fresh in people's minds for years. He had plenty of time, but it's pushing 10 years. And dude, come on. How old is he? He's like in his 60s.
At least.
I mean, you got to hurry this up.
He put together the story outline and what he wants this movie to be about. He's put together David S. Goyer, Charles Eagley, and Josh Friedman. The last one was the one who oversaw the Sarah Connor Chronicles on TV. Those three have been enlisted to come up and write the script for the movie. And also, I think, eventually the other two as well down the line. No release date is set, but it's looked for a possible somewhere in 2019, 2020 release. Cameron also said that we are starting a search for an 18-something female to be the new centerpiece of this new story. We will full time. We will have characters from the future and the present. There will be mostly new characters, but we will have Arnold and Linda to anchor it. From the article I read, he's kind of taking the Lucasfilm new trilogy Star Wars approach, bringing back two of the main staples, plugging them in, but they're not the centerpiece or the center of the movie. Mm-hmm. Other characters will be, but he's using them as the anchors to get, I think, to help people return. And at this point, because I've also read at another time when he said he was looking at doing more Terminator movies once he got the rights back, that he was looking to make, he hinted at a trilogy then, and it sounded like he was wanting to, after that, shut it down. And if that's what his goal is to make and finally kind of bring the Terminator franchise to a close, and they're good, I'm all for it.
Yeah, if they're a good movie, I'm for it, obviously. That's kind of the thing with these Terminator movies, and granted, I don't think they've been in very good creative hands for a very long time, but the fact of the matter is, I kind of feel like the story closed on the second one. I mean,
yeah,
best case scenario, and also worst case scenario, every case scenario, a sequel is always going to be, oh, but time has changed again and more robots are coming from the future. All right, how many times are we going to see this?
See, that was my whole thing after Genesis. The last movie didn't do so hot at the box office. I mean, it did better internationally than it did domestically. But how many times can you keep telling stories of same thing happening, of robots decide, oh, we got to kill this guy, send someone back from the future into the past to do this, and then they take out the robot. How many times can you do this? Unless he's figured out some new plot device that we haven't seen yet that would make you go, oh, I haven't thought about that. That would be cool.
What was really funny was when we were kids, me and my friend assumed that Terminator 3 would be the actual, like, Judgment Day, so to speak, where we actually spent a movie where we see, like, we actually got that, not in the third one, but we got that in Terminator Salvation, and guess what? The short flashback scenes in the first Terminator were way better than that whole movie. I mean, that's the truth. I mean, they were. I never watched the
Genesis?
TV show. I'm never going to watch Genesis. It's never going to happen.
I think I've told you this once before on a podcast when the Terminator thing got brought up, but for what Genesis is, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's not great. It's not necessarily good, but it's okay.
Right. It's a throwaway movie.
For what it is, if you want to look at it as its own little bubble of a movie, it's okay. It's kind of almost like rehashing the first 2 or 3 movies, but it's
that was the same
like,
year
what's the point, though?
That was the same year that Jurassic World came out, and that is the nicest thing that I could say about Jurassic World, probably. And I don't even want to say it. That's the nicest thing I could say about it. I hated that movie. I hate it because...
Even though it made over $1 billion.
Yeah, so what?
And you're getting a sequel.
Yeah, I'm not going to watch. I like dinosaurs, so whatever, but I'll probably skip it. You know, that was the thing about Jurassic Park was, you know, yeah, it's a kid's movie, and like when you really watch it as an adult, it's like littered with plot holes, and there are just scenes of nothing but exposition. So, I mean, it's not a perfect movie, but it did 2 things. It revolutionized special effects. People have talked about that to death. It did something even more important. What it did was it brought the modern understanding of dinosaurs as warm-blooded ancestors to birds, fast-moving, the new understanding. I don't want to say idea because it's not an idea. It's an understanding and it's fact. Dinosaurs that had actually been around amongst scholars, scientists, students since probably the 70s, but the masses still knew them as these big lumbering lizards.
Right.
From what we thought they were from the 20s. I can't remember the guy that painted all those really amazing dinosaur paintings that everyone knows from the 20s, but you know what I'm talking about. And those old silent movies where you see them.
Well, and the original King Kong movie had dinosaurs in it.
People still, in the 90s, the masses still thought of them as these big lumbering, slow yet powerful lizards. They weren't. So that was an amazing thing that Jurassic Park did. I mean, yeah, we can complain about how, oh, the velociraptors are too big, but whatever. That's really missing the point. It was really the responsibility of Jurassic World to continue that, and they didn't. I mean, by this point, we now know that most carnivorous dinosaurs, who are the direct ancestors of birds, were feathered, like the velociraptors in real life had feathers. Like, we know that for a fact. We've discovered actual fossils of that. Look, feathered velociraptors look terrible. They lose all their coolness when they just look like big birds. Mm-hmm. But they should have done something rather than just continue. At this point, the dinosaurs that they show now are the same as they were in the 90s, and it's now like an old way of looking at it. So they've reversed what the first one did so well. Again, I'm not saying they should have showed feathered velociraptors, but at least talk about it. They could have just showed some chicks with feathers and explained that they try to genetically get rid of the feathers because they're not very marketable with feathers, and that would be this total meta thing.
Right.
And like the movie wasn't scary. It was just stupid. I'm not going to talk about this forever. This movie's 2 years old, and I only saw it once, and I was really drunk. I don't know why I'm going on about it, but
I saw Jurassic World as a fun summer popcorn movie. It was enjoyable. It didn't have the worst plot, and it was just a fun movie to see. And it kind of brought back a little nostalgia because there was that scene where the kids kind of run into the old part of the park, where the first one was supposed to take place.
That was interesting.
I thoroughly enjoyed the movie for what it is. I look at the Jurassic Park movies, the Transformer movies. There's another franchise out there, and I'm forgetting what I'm. Anyway,
just big things beating each other up. Yeah.
I look at those type of movies. I don't expect any sort of huge Oscar-winning type of plot out of them.
Yeah, but at least the first Jurassic Park was good. Here's the thing, though. Like, there's no room for any sequel to be good because it's like, why do people keep going back to the island?
At least the sequel to Jurassic World is not taking place on the island.
Are the dinosaurs going to get out?
From what I understand, is on the mainland.
Okay.
They might reference the island. There might even be a scene or something on the island, but from my understanding, everything that's supposed to take place in the sequel to Jurassic World is on the mainland. They've come up with something new, and that's fine because the island thing is getting old. But as you said, we'll move on. One of my other topics I have here is Matthew Vaughn, director of both Kingsman movies, Kick-Ass, and one or two other movies.
X-Men.
First Class.
First Class, yeah.
Anyway, he's being looked at by Warner Brothers to possibly direct a Man of Steel 2 movie. He did an online interview. They asked him, well, what would your vision of Superman be if he had the chance to do it like he wanted to? And he said, weirdly, if I do Superman and I made the mistake of telling someone yesterday I have spoken about it, I think my main take would be it's really boring, but make a Superman film. I just don't feel a proper Superman. I think Donner did it to perfection for that time. I want to do a modern version of the Donner movie. I don't think he really meant literally, but anyway. Go back to the source material. For me, Superman is colorful, feel-good, heroic. He's a beacon of light in darkness, and that's what I think Superman should be.
Well, that's what they did with the first Captain America movie.
Right.
The first Captain America movie borrows a lot from the old Superman movie. The Spider-Man movies, the old Sam Raimi ones, did have some darkness to them, but they still borrowed a lot tonally from the old Superman movie. They were a little bit darker, but still. No, I'm for that.
Well, see, I think Warner Brothers has a chance with Justice League, and obviously they're going to bring Superman back.
Yeah.
They have a chance to make some character changes with their Superman and still keep Henry Cavill in that character, and that's fine. I just don't know how far DC, let's say he would get the job, how far they're going to let him go with it, or what their vision is. Now, of course, they are, they're going to make that standalone Joker movie with Martin Scorsese producing. Maybe they're looking at making a standalone Superman movie, but I think that would be wrong in doing so. I mean, to me, if you're going to do a Superman movie, keep it within the DCEU, in my opinion, at least. I mean, just give us something maybe a little bit, I don't want to say happier, but at least more kind of what Superman is. I don't know, maybe I'm grasping at the wrong thing here.
No, I think you're right.
But then again, hasn't there been several kind of incarnations of the source material for Superman as far as...
Well, see, this is one thing that...
Besides the original one that we know of when he first started.
One thing that the Richard Donner one did right, well, it did a lot of things right, but one thing it really did right was, in a lot of superhero movies, including Superman Returns and Captain America, actually all the Captain America movies borrow a little bit from this, is the idea that when that movie was done in the 70s, they were taking a character that was big in the 40s and really big in the 50s, and kind of, after Vietnam and Kennedy and civil rights and all this other stuff, and then just total sleaze and trash that was the decade to follow, the 70s. The movie makes it very obvious that he's this very corny, old-fashioned guy out of time. Now, they don't point fingers and laugh at him. The kids don't get it, but the adults kind of do. And they show that, but then they show that, there's something to it. And they don't beat you over the head with it. Captain America, of course, does that too. Maybe that's just kind of the theme that Superman movies should always be, is there is kind of this lost fairy tale, which is what Superman is. This lost fairy tale of the American spirit. Maybe it's still in us. maybe it's still around. And
because he's always kind of been looked at kind of as an overgrown Boy Scout.
Well, and I mean, you know, that's this ideal. He represents the ideal not only of the literal character, but also of America of the 1940s and 50s. Now, was that ideal a fantasy? Yeah. But maybe we can, starting with the Richard Donner one and, you know, with Captain America, it's like, well, maybe as fantastical as that ideal is, maybe there's still something to it. And that's what those movies did right. I know they were trying to do something different, but maybe you can't, you know, maybe even the cartoon, the 90s cartoon did that too. The Bruce Timm one, it was the companion piece to the Batman cartoon that was way more popular, was really good. And they still managed to put in all the sci-fi stuff. Yeah, Superman, corny, blah, blah, blah. But there was still all the sci-fi stuff like Brainiac and, you know, all these other characters. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's possible. Like, you can make a good Superman movie. There was a great Superman cartoon. There's great Superman comic books. The idea that this character's so old-fashioned that you can't do anything with him is just asinine.
Do you think, though, Warner Brothers can still make this current version of Superman back to that idealistic version of Superman, but yet still not necessarily ruin what they started with the Superman, as far as kind of almost saying, okay, we're just completely re-scrapping him and starting over?
They don't have to reboot it, if that's what you're saying. But look, DC really had a rocky start, and they went for this doom and gloom. Their first movies are all doom, gloom, moody, and then
brooding.
And then you get
Wonder Woman,
which, of course, was it was a ripoff of Captain America, but it was a fun movie. Now, when it showed actual war, it got serious, and that's what made it a good movie. It was a fun movie that could get serious, and you can totally do that with Superman. They can totally do that. They have just proven that, yes, they can make a good movie, and I think Joss Whedon's not perfect. I mean, there are fanboys that act like he is. He's not perfect. But, come on, he made Avengers, and Avengers is awesome. If he just makes Avengers again with Justice League, it's going to be a good movie.
Oh, yeah, but you're all still going to have a lot of Zack Snyder's imprint on that Justice League movie as well.
And actually, that's a good thing, because Zack Snyder is really good at art direction. I mean, go back and watch Man of Steel, honestly. The problem that he has is story, character development, basically everything that makes a movie. But like, and I'm done saying negative things about him. I just said that as for a joke. He has his weaknesses, but his strengths, you know, he's very much like a Michael Bay. I like him better than Michael Bay. He can make a visually stunning movie. If you watch that movie, there were just shot after shot of just visually stunning moments that could have been painted. Man of Steel, Watchmen, 300. I actually don't like 300, but it had some stuff that was pause it and look at the shot. Even Batman vs. Superman, there were some amazing visual shots in that movie too. Actually, a lot. I mean, that's what he's really good at, and that's what he really brought to the table with. If you have his visual cuteness with Joss Whedon's storytelling, I mean, I do think that there's a lot of potential for this movie to be good.
I'm hoping it's good.
Because, I mean, that's actually Joss Whedon's big weakness is Avengers looked really good. I don't know, maybe that's not his weakness, because Avengers also had a lot of really good hero shots. I mean, he was really good at it in Avengers, and who knows, maybe there were some art directors on set with that one to kind of guide him. But like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, none of that stuff looked good. The monsters always looked stupid, and the shots
being
always...
television budget, you're probably limited anyway.
So I don't know. I do think that that's actually a good combination to have potential to make a really good movie. And Gal Gadot is amazing. You know, for what it's worth, I do like Ben Affleck as Batman.
Yeah.
I don't love him, but I do like him. I really like him as Bruce Wayne.
He makes an excellent Bruce Wayne. He's got that look about him.
Yeah. Going back to Zack Snyder's talent for design, Ben Affleck with his big, weird-looking chin, like he's the perfect Batman and Bruce Wayne. He visually looks like
the character from the comics,
yeah. Which, really, I don't think any other Batman really does. Maybe...
As far as the others, I don't know. I think the only one that would come close, and maybe because it's only fresher, would be...
Well, Christian Bale is the perfect Batman, but Christian Bale is also different, though. He's really a very different character than the one...
Right.
He is the best, but his Bruce Wayne is not overly confident. He's not, whereas like the Bruce Wayne in the comics always knows... Sometimes it's a bit much. He always knows what to do. He's very confident, very smart, whereas Christian Bale's didn't have all the answers. He just tried really hard. I actually think he's the most relatable Batman of all. I mean, he's the one that, other than being a rich guy, he really is the one that, anyone probably could be him if we were also billionaires.
Yeah.
But,
I really like to see Ben Affleck in a solo Batman movie. Problem is, I kind of have this feeling from what you keep reading and hearing, I don't think you're going to get the solo Batman movie with Ben Affleck. I think it's going to end up being somebody else after Justice League. And obviously, Warner Brothers and Ben Affleck are doing the right thing, even if he's not returning after Justice League, by coming out, Ben Affleck, that is, saying, yeah, I'm back. I'm Batman for as long as they want me. I mean, that just makes sense PR-wise, because you don't want everyone thinking, well, if he's not Batman after Justice League, what the hell am I going to see this for? But I would really like to see him in 2 or 3 solo Batman movies, so I could sit there and say, oh, yeah, he was better than Christian Bale, or Christian Bale was better than him, or whatever the case may be, to make that judgment. Because just seeing him on, Batman v Superman, then seeing him in a group setting in Justice League, to me, is not enough to say I could put him, per se, in ranking with the other guys who have played Batman in the past in their own movies.
Right.
That's just my perception of trying to figure out, I like him in Batman vs. Superman, and I think probably be my favorite part of the Justice League movie, but I really would like to see him in a solo Batman movie, and I don't think we're going to get that.
Probably not.
Now, have you heard much about the standalone Joker movie that they're going to do with Martin Scorsese producing? It's supposed to take place in the early 80s, and it's kind of like Joker meets Taxi Driver, so to speak.
Okay.
That's what Scorsese's envisioning in this, okay? He's not directing, but he is having say in the script, and he will be producing it. Someone else will direct it. They have not hired an actor to play the Joker yet, but it's kind of like Warner Bros. Is kind of treating it like a one-off comic type of thing. It's just gonna be the standalone Joker movie, not connected to the DCEU. There's also rumors
that could be interesting.
Yeah, there's also rumors that Batman movie, the Planet of the Apes director, is looking to want to do a trilogy, maybe set outside the DCEU now. That could be one way they're going to work, of going with a younger actor to play Batman, set at a different. Either way, I'm kind of curious as what they're going to do with the Batman character, either with or without Ben Affleck. And also, I got questions with the Superman character in Justice League. Are they going to bring character Clark back, or are they just going to leave him dead as well and just bring Superman back? I'm interested in the Justice League. I got a lot of questions. I'm going in very open-minded. Something you mentioned while we're talking about Superman, I've watched Man of Steel here like 2 or 3 times for some reason over the last year, and it seems like the more I watch it, the more parts about it that I do like. Man of Steel.
Yeah.
So it has grown on me. I mean, when I first saw it, I liked it in the sense I enjoyed the movie. I wouldn't say it was one of my favorite Superman movies, but over time, the more I've watched it, the more it's grown on me.
It's not a bad movie. Now, I don't think it's a good representation of the character, but it has a lot of really good stuff in it. It has a lot of really bad stuff in it too.
Of course, I also like the part where Zod's talking to Clark and he's wearing the Kansas City Royals t-shirt.
Yeah.
I thought that was cool.
That scene, again, that goes back to, I think that's the same scene. That goes back to Snyder's really good eye for visual storytelling, is when they're in that hologram place that looks like Kansas, and then the sky turns bleak and red, and then
he's standing on a bunch of skulls.
Yeah. And that is visually very, very good storytelling. It's just the tone was wrong,
Last thing I've got here is Fox is releasing the New Mutants movie early next year. I want to say March or April of 2018. The chairman and CEO of 20th Century Fox, Stacey Snyder, was asked about how this New Mutants movie would stand out differently from all the other superhero movies that are coming out, and even some of their own movies Fox has put out. She said that New Mutants is about these teenagers who are just coming into their powers. It's like watching mutants go through adolescence, and they have no impulse control, so they're dangerous. The only solution is to put them in a breakfast club, detention, cuckoo's nest, institutional setting. It protects people on the outside, but it's a strange, combustible inside. The genre is like a haunted house movie with a bunch of hormonal teenagers. We haven't seen it as a superhero movie whose genre is more like The Shining than we're teenagers, let's save the world. That's how she explained their New Mutants movie. I don't know much about it. Obviously, they haven't brought out any sort of trailer yet. Kind of Breakfast Club.
That's kind of
Cuckoo's Nest is interesting. And I'm not sure what characters with the New Mutants they've got in that movie either. And of course,
honestly, they could just make up some new ones at this point. I kind of have a feeling they're going to run that X-Men franchise to the ground. They've got a hold of it, and they are not letting go.
What's the possibilities that they haven't really announced a true X-Men movie with what that we've got in the past? What are the chances they make this New Mutants and they kind of tie it in back into the Deadpool universe? Well, of course, I think Deadpool's all kind of controlled. You think that maybe they might try and go that way and just kind of leave?
Well, when New Mutants was rebooted in the 90s, New Mutants was originally in the 80s, and it was kind of like Professor X's B team. Because, see, in the 60s, the X-Men were teenagers, and it was a school and all that. And in the 70s, they got away from that when they brought in the new ones like Storm and Wolverine and Nightcrawler. And they really got away from the teenage school years stuff, which was a good thing because the comic got way better. But Chris Claremont also said, let's kind of revisit that. Like, it's still technically a school. We're all the teenagers other than Kitty Pryde and Colossus. None of these others were teenagers. They're all adults. So he decided to make a New Mutants series, which was, they were the actual students of Xavier's school. I never really read it. That's all I know about it. But and then in the 90s when Rob Liefeld rebooted it, that's where Cable comes in.
Have you seen the picture of Josh Brolin as Cable?
Yeah, he looks pretty cool. He looks really cool.
That picture looked awesome.
I gotta say, he actually looks cooler in that than he does as Thanos. I'm kind of ready for them to just hurry up and get Thanos over with. Like, this is going on, 6 years now?
Well, Iron Man came out in 2008.
No, so. I mean, Thanos was in Avengers. That was 2012.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's pushing 6 years. It's like, okay, let's just do this already. Kind of tired of it now.
Will be 6 years by the time the Infinity War comes out. Yeah, in April or May. I think it's May, actually. But then you get the sequel to Infinity War and the following, I think, November of 2019. So it's like only a year and a half later. I think of the Marvel movies, though, I'm most looking forward to right now is Black Panther. I believe comes out in February.
That one looks really good. I gotta be honest, though, for me, it's Ragnarok. That movie, I don't think that's going to be the smartest movie in the world, but I'm okay with that. That's the thing about Thor. Just make it just balls out crazy and stupid and loud and annoying. That's really what Thor is all about. Don't try to bog him down with anything smart. Just make it really bright colors, and that's what it needs to be. Mm-hmm. And it looks awesome.
Oh, especially that scene with Hulk and Thor going after each other.
Yeah.
I think that's what everyone's really anticipating. Anything else on your mind about movies or what we talked about or anything of that nature?
I don't think so. I can't think of anything.
Well, I know we haven't done a lot of podcasts this year, as we mentioned at the beginning, but I know towards the end of the year we should do a lot more because we've got obviously Justice League that we've talked about, Thor Ragnarok, which you just mentioned, quote, a new Star Wars movie coming out. What anyone who follows my website or thing knows, I'm a huge Star Wars nut. I'm looking forward to all three of those movies towards the end of the year. The final, quote, movie as Adam West as Batman comes out, I believe, on Blu-ray in October, sometime early October.
Oh, yeah.
Batman versus Two-Face with William Shatner as the voice of Two-Face.
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
So I'm planning on picking that up as soon as it hits stores. That I'm really kind of hoping it's at least as clever as the first one.
Yeah.
Because you remember the first one showed that trailer, and that trailer basically of everything they put out all took place in the first 30 minutes, and you're thinking, wait a minute, you just basically ran through everything in 25 minutes of what you had on the trailer. What are you going to do next? Yeah. And then it took that, I won't say it in case someone hasn't watched it by now, but it took that twist. And all of a sudden, someone you weren't expecting kind of comes the antagonist for the rest of the movie for a while, which was inventive. So I hope it's something of that nature. There's a twist somewhere in the movie that makes it interesting. Have you seen the trailers for that? I don't know if you have.
Yeah, it looks really good.
It looks
really funny.
It looks good, especially with, what's the doctor that's in the Batman world?
Dr. Hugo Strange.
Yeah, Dr. Strange pulling all the levers and get all those bad guys in the chairs. And yeah, that looked fun. So, of course, the typical Batman humor from that era that they're doing for the Batman from, and plus with it being Adam's West last go around, so it'll make it a little bit extra special, I think. Any final thoughts?
Nope.
All right. As always, you can find links of James's True Believers on my website. You can follow me on at my website or on Facebook and Twitter, and I've also now added Instagram to the mix. Ooh. Yeah. Thank you for listening, and we will return with podcast number 37. We'll talk at you later.